Okay, hello and welcome to our Tuesday afternoon live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar. Normally, Angie is here with me, although she wasn't able to make it this week, so it's just going to be me. So I hope all is well with everybody. If you are new here, welcome. And if you are returning here, welcome. How is everybody's week going? UNA says, hi, Dana. Hi. Marcia, Damien. Welcome, welcome. Crystal, Tracy. What would you guys like to talk about today? Any ideas? any topics that are at the forefront of your mind? Christine, Kim, welcome, welcome. Let's see. Well, okay, while people are kind of coming in, I'll talk about a topic that's been on my mind lately. And that is the topic of forgiving ourselves. And when this topic was first mentioned, it was really new to me and I took a lot of offense to it. And I thought, well, especially in the context of, um, narcissistic abuse, I thought, well, I don't have to forgive myself for anything. Like I, was caught up in this giant manipulation and, all that. And I didn't know, but like I have no ownership of that. Had I known different, I would have done different. And what I've found over time is, and not only with just this situation, but just multiple situations in my life, how taking some time to just acknowledge that to ourselves, that we did the best we could at the time and that we forgive ourselves. That we forgive. And it's weird because I didn't even realize that I was holding on to so much anger and hurt that was directed at myself, but I was. And I guess if anything, that registered more as frustration and disappointment, but it wasn't registering as the hurt and anger that it really was. And so kind of taking some time to do a mental inventory of all of the different hurtful or just emotionally painful situations that we've been in, and acknowledging, you know what, I did the best I could at that time. And that's all any of us can do. And I forgive myself for not doing more or not doing different or not doing better. Uh, so just something that's been rolling around in my brain for a while. Oh boy. Veronica says, hello. No one talks about racist narcissists that marry a dark skin colored woman to eventually humiliate and denigrate. Sorry, I can't speak today. To eventually humiliate and denigrate her to feel superior. Yes. And you're right. That is something that's not spoken about that often. There is a big component, and I think draw to, for people that have a really damaged, unhealthy ego like narcissists do, that intentionally seek out, if they have issues with women or men or it, or people of color, it might just be that extra thrill of added humiliation or denigration. It's disgusting, but it does exist. There's, to add even a darker twist to this, I've seen some of this in the BDSM community, And what's even worse is a lot of times there's people that uh, take on the role of being submissive, and they knowingly and willingly enter into a relationship where they're going to be the submissive partner and the other person's going to dominate them, not realizing that they have all the control. It's the submissive person in a relationship like that that has all the control. And if they get with somebody who, and not, I guess, not realizing that they can say no and that they have a voice, and it's important that they use that. And I've seen people, like, horrific amounts of abuse happen where somebody's gotten tangled up with um, a person whose uh, kink is denigration and humiliation. And they thought, well, I was in this submissive relationship with them, and I didn't realize that I couldn't say no. And that added level of damage of, oh my gosh, well, I was a willing participant, but kind of not really, because I wasn't aware of the power that I had. It's really, it's just tragic, beyond tragic. So, and again, I think this level of sadism and, um, need to punish or to feel superior to other people, these are the actions of small, weak people. Healthy, well-adjusted, well-balanced people don't need to go around with, they don't have an axe to grind. They don't have a need to prove things. They don't have a need to always feel superior. It's the people that have who feel insignificant and who feel um, that have a damaged, broken ego. Those are the ones that are going around um, hurting others. So if you've been on the receiving end of somebody who's treated you like that, my heart goes out to you. But please realize, okay, this is just a deeply damaged person. That was a deeply damaged person, and their behavior is a reflection of them and not a reflection of you. Yeah. So, um, yes, UNA says last week was anxiety filled with panic attacks. I'm just relaxing today. Yes, I was struggling with that as well. Wednesday, I was just having massive amounts of anxiety. As some of you know, most of my family lives in Houston, and they were set to get hit with two really major hurricanes. Uh, and even though, I mean, I grew up with hurricanes, like, this is something that we're all used to. My brother evacuated; he left town. My other family members were going to stay, and I was just started having panic attacks about it, and the thought of, oh my gosh, and who's going to help, and my stepbrother has diabetes, and him being in dirty water, and just all of it was just really knocking me over. But thankfully, um, everybody in, at least in my family in Houston, is okay. So, but again, my heart goes out to the people that the hurricanes did hit. Tracy says, I'm in a new relationship and I'm scared to death. He is a narcissist too. He is so pushy and needy and clingy. He hasn't shown the hatefulness of my ex, but I definitely think he's showing some signs. Okay, so let's talk about that for a second here. Um, the fact that he's pushy and needy and clingy, but especially pushy, is a problem. And that's worth addressing. So I'm a big believer that there is no such thing as a small issue in a relationship. Any issue has the potential to end a relationship, and especially the issues that are not addressed and resolved. So if he's being pushy, then it's going to be up to you to really set boundaries and hold them. And if he continues to push past your boundaries, then you'll have to make the decision of, okay, well, then what's next? However, with that said, I would encourage you to have a line as far as where your deal breakers are. Um, I see a lot of people, myself included for a long time, when they work on boundaries, they they stay in these toxic relationships and they just keep bringing up issues. Well, that's not okay that you were trying to have sex with me when I was asleep, or it's not okay that you were flirting with the waitress. It's not okay that you yelled at my dog. It's not okay that you did this and that. And the biggest part of having a boundary is also having some sort of consequence for it. So just standing there and saying, "Hey, this is not okay with me," or talking about it, that's only part of it. The other half needs to be getting clear with yourself of if this person, if their behavior doesn't change, then what are you going to do? So many of us have had that kind of flipped around where we think we just need to stay in these situations and then hope that the other person will eventually change. And th- uh, that doesn't work. And it's just unhealthy for us. So, you know, yeah, him being pushy, needy, clingy, you don't need to wait until that behavior develops into hatefulness for it to be a problem. If somebody's treating you in a way that you're not comfortable with, it's an issue and it is worthy of being discussed. And the reality is, too, we're all going to have issues with other people. That's just part of we're all different, right? So we're all individuals. We're all going to have different ways, different thoughts and feelings and opinions and emotions and viewpoints and all of this. We're going to kind of bump heads with other people from time to time. That in itself is not the problem. The problem is how that's handled, in or not handled. So if it's not handled and it's just constantly being minimized of, oh, it's not that big of a deal. I've experienced worse, or, oh, oh, he says he didn't mean it, or she says she had a long day or whatever. That those are just excuses. So when both people are being authentic and they're being honest with themselves and honest with their partner, when these issues do come up of, hey, I'm just not okay with this, or um I think we need to revisit the family budget, or uh, I don't know, cleaning tasks around the house, or whatever it might be, for both people to have that respect there. And this is a big part of respect of, okay, if this is a concern for you, I'm going to take this seriously. So respect isn't just about, holding doors open and not being hateful or intentionally hurtful. It's across the board. It's um, it's the ability to express empathy for another person. And to hold space for them and to acknowledge, okay, if this is an issue for them, then it needs to be discussed and we need to figure out how we're going to resolve it, kind of a thing. So uh, yeah, it's a problem if somebody's not respecting your boundaries. They're not respecting you. And it's and it's difficult if we're not really grounded in ourselves. It can be difficult, and I should say easy. It can be easy to be pushed off balance if we're not grounded in ourselves. When we fully realize, hey, you know what, I have every right to be treated with dignity and respect. And a relationship that's lacking that and lacking effective communication and emotional availability and uh, kind of just the basics of appropriate behavior, I can't function in that. So if this other person isn't open, if they're not growth oriented, if they're not able to work as a team, then there is no relationship here. It's only going to be a power struggle. And that's exhausting. And those tend to not end well because nobody likes to do that for the long term. And it just doesn't work. Even if you completely gave in and allowed him to do everything his way, you allowed him to get his way 100% of the time, and all of that, um, the it's a high price to pay for a relationship, because then the result is you silencing and erasing major parts of yourself that aren't in agreement with him. And frankly, no relationship is worth that. Okay, let's see. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, Rhonda mentions, what if you have shame when you try to assert a boundary? And Elle makes the wonderful comment, shame is from your past, your upbringing, etc. Yes. I guess, Rhonda, uh, can you talk more about what that feeling of shame comes across as? Is it the feeling that you're doing something wrong? Or is it the feeling that you don't deserve to be setting a boundary, that you are wrong? Tracy says, he constantly follows me around and wants to always be touching me. It drives me crazy. When I try to tell him that it's smothering to me, he pouts and refuses to talk to me for hours. Yeah, that's worth having a sincere conversation about. Everybody has their limits as far as and expectations as far as the level of physical closeness that they want in a relationship. And it's okay to be like, "Yeah, I don't want to be grabbed all the time. I don't want to be touched all the time. It's too much." That's okay. And but it is concerning that if he doesn't get his way, he pouts and then refuses to talk to you for hours. That's really immature and manipulative, frankly. So definite at a minimum, I definitely wouldn't feed into it. So if he's gonna, just like you wouldn't with a little kid, if they're gonna pout that they don't get their way, you just pretend like it doesn't bother you. You go into the room, you start watching a movie, you don't let it get to you, and make it clear with him, this is, um, I really enjoy when you touch me during, in this way during these times, but, not if we're out in public, not in front of my parents, not every time, it's just, uh, it's uncomfortable. Okay. And Rhonda says, it feels that I don't deserve to set a boundary, that I have no right to do so. Okay. So it sounds kind of like a mix of guilt as well that's in there. I think that's pretty common for most of us when, and like Elle was saying, that programming, because that's really what it is, that programming about who we are and how we should be treated and how we interact with the world, that tends to start at a young age, and it tends to start at home. And so I think, and it takes time and practice to set boundaries and to get more comfortable with them. At first, it is very uncomfortable, and that discomfort can last for quite a while. I still struggle with it, you know? Um, and I guess I would encourage you to, you don't have to do everything perfectly, and you don't even have to try to do everything perfectly. So it's just moving in the right direction of knowing how big of a deal certain boundaries are and what you just don't have the energy for. Kind of knowing what battles you're wanting to fight. And the the thing too is with boundaries is it's significantly easier to set them and hold them with new people in your life. So I'm not saying that you need to kind of clean out everybody that's in your life and start over, but I guess just kind of realize most people, when they start setting boundaries, they tend to do it with people that they interact with the most, because that tends to be the most long-standing issues. I, that's important and that's very valid, but that's also jumping into the deep end of the pool. It's very difficult to um, to stand up for ourselves when we haven't for so long, and that's been the dynamic we've had with this other person. When we're interacting with other people, there's not so much of the well, there's not really an emotional investment there. And so we're more okay with walking away if they start, if they don't respect our boundaries and they don't know us in any other way. So so if we do set boundaries, it doesn't come across as punishing or vindictive or, um, any, well, and I guess it might to some extent, but it's not to the extent that somebody that we've had in our lives. It's just easier to hold. So if you say to somebody, that you're dating, okay, I can't talk after 9 o'clock because I spend 30 minutes reading at night before I go to bed, and that's just my time. And um, most like reasonable, mature people are okay with the boundaries of others. Sort of like, oh, okay, no big deal. It's And if they're not, and you continue to hold it, you're like, no, that's a big thing for me. That's important. Or it's important that I go to, um, that I'm there for my kids' soccer games, or that I have this online group, we play cards, or whatever it might be, that you have, your boundaries and your expectations. And those are just boundaries with time. But so there's boundaries across the board, with how somebody's touching you, how they joke with you, how they interact with you, how they interact with your friends, um, all of that. So, yeah. Elle says, yeah, we have to see those things as things that we need to change. It's that faulty programming. Yes. Yes, I agree completely. And these things too, we all have them. Even narcissists, well, I think probably especially narcissists, have a bunch of faulty programming. Everybody has some degree of faulty programming. It's just part of being human. So realizing this and realizing that undoing that faulty programming, it's a process, and it's basically like unburying yourself. So it takes a little while to do that. You're just going to kind of clear off one layer at a time. And um, that can feel overwhelming at first, but it really, if we can embrace a different mindset towards it and just realize this is the path of personal growth and personal development, and it's not an easy path, but boy is it worth it. And the good news is it doesn't take like massive changes in order for your life to start working for you. These changes compound on each other, and it can happen pretty quickly. Okay, let's see here. Let me scroll up. Rhonda says, I can say the words, but don't feel comfortable setting my boundaries. It just does not sit well and probably comes across as lame. And that's where the time and practice comes in. So I think a good first step with setting boundaries. Well, okay, let me back up a little bit. For so many of us, setting boundaries is the equivalent of us standing up for ourselves and kind of facing that dragon. And it can feel really intimidating, especially if we grew up, if our of what we're used to is sheer terror at asserting ourselves or having an opinion or thoughts or feelings or emotions that were different. For many people, it tends to be a parent that was very much like a dictator and intimidating. And so, as a kind of a survival strategy and to stay in that family, they learned that okay, the only way to have peace in my life is for me just to give in. And so the result of that is conflict and confrontation becomes almost intolerable. It's so uncomfortable. And I think it always is to some extent. It's just awkward. Uh, but for those of us that are coming from really intense backgrounds, it's so much so. It's so magnified. Um, So one of the things I encourage people to do when they first start trying to set boundaries, because it can, I mean, some people start having panic attacks, some people break out in a cold sweat. Um, some people's default, they freeze and then they default into it to saying yes and giving in because they just absolutely panic. So I encourage people, if that's where your level of struggle is, to first bring some space to it. So try to break the habit of instant agreement. So if somebody asks you, "Oh, can you watch my kids?" or "Oh, can you work late?" or "Oh, can you do this?" To say, "I'm gonna have to check my schedule and get back to you," and that'll give you some time. Or you know what? I need to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. And then go to the bathroom. And the point of doing this, of bringing some time and space into it, is to allow your prefrontal cortex, like the logic and critical thinking part of your brain, to come back online. Because when we go into that fight or flight mode, which is often triggered for a lot of people when they're having to stand up for themselves, uh, that part of our brain is greatly diminished. And so instead of becoming responsive, we're not able to really become responsive. And so instead we become reactive. And that's where all of this um, um, kind of sympathetic nervous system response comes in: the sweating, the quick heartbeat, the feeling nauseous, feeling like you're gonna pass out, you know um, these extreme reactions. That's why that's happening. So giving yourself some time to just breathe and collect yourself helps tremendously. And then also coming up with um, some sort of responses, maybe writing them down so you can review them, of ways to say no, different ways to say no. And everybody, I think most people have at least one or two people in their life that are very intimidating to set boundaries with. It might be your boss, it might be your mother, it might be your ex spouse, it might be, your adult child. Figuring out, okay, who are these people that intimidate you the most. And then it can also help to think about, okay, where is this fear coming from? Of, if I say no, then what? Am I afraid that they're not going to like me, that they're not going to talk to me again, that um, that they're going to pout, that they're going to sulk, that they're going to, what behavior of theirs am I concerned about? And so once you kind of put a face to that monster, it makes it a lot easier to then address it. So if you're like, okay, so like in the situation earlier, with the gal who was saying, yeah, she tried to set a boundary with her boyfriend. She's like, hey, please just stop grabbing me all the time. You know, I don't like it. And then he pouts and doesn't talk for several hours. Okay, realizing that's the dynamic that's set up, is, setting a boundary, and then you get poutiness and sulking and silent treatment for a couple hours, right? Okay, then how are you going to respond to that? So anticipating, okay, this is how they've reacted in the past when I've set a boundary. And now what's the next step for me? How am I going to handle this when they start doing that? Okay, I can go into the room and start watching a movie. I can leave and go take myself out for dinner. I can go for a walk. I can, start thinking of things that you can do. Or if they continue to want to argue with you, to think about, okay, I set a boundary, uh, and now I need to figure out, okay, how do I come back to them pushing my boundary again? So then what's just anticipating as much as you possibly can, I guess is what I'm saying. It really does help. And realizing over time, once you get to that place of realizing that you deserve to have boundaries just like everybody does, it's a part, it's a very basic, um, bare minimum part of being a human being, that you're entitled to have your boundaries and you're entitled to be self-protective. I mean, that's what boundaries are for. It's reasonable to protect yourself and to set boundaries and have standards and deal breakers, and that your life will only work if you have those in place. And yes, other people should also know the basics of appropriate behavior with how to treat us. But there's a lot of people out there that do know that and they don't care. And they will push boundaries and push boundaries and push boundaries. And that's just how they get through life. And it's not right and it's not fair. And you have every right to be angry and hurt and disgusted and full of rage and to feel the way that you feel about that, you know? So, but it's okay. It's absolutely okay and healthy to set boundaries and to learn to say no. And so sometimes doing it in small ways, uh, sometimes role playing too can help. So there's an exercise, it's called like empty chair, where you literally you go through the motions, you role play of, let's say it's your boss that you struggle with setting boundaries with, pretending your boss is in that chair and that you're having this conversation and they are asking you to work late or to pick up extra shifts or whatever it might be. To You can role play that out with them. And it also helps with empty chair to let them just have it and to say all of the things that you would like to say if there were no consequences, right? Letting them know that it's not right and it's not fair and it's not okay and the way they treat you is disgusting and all of that. But practicing the the wording of boundaries is really helpful. Don't wait until you're in the moment when you're panicked and you're flustered to try to come up with what you're going to say. And then too, so Elle is saying, yeah, I had shame being assertive because of my aggressive, abusive grandma. She wanted the control, so me being assertive or boundaries would ruin that. Yes. And this is a good example of how these kind of dynamics set the stage early on. And oftentimes it's not until we are an adult that we fully realize, oh my gosh, I'm still carrying this dysfunctional dynamic around with me because this is what I learned early on of how I was supposed to behave. But I, this isn't working for me and I don't need to do this anymore. And when we are coming from a place of being passive and scared and afraid and feeling unworthy of setting boundaries, that's not the adult version of us. That's the wounded child version of us. Or you could even say like the wounded adult version of us. So it can help to kind of get clear on, okay, who's steering the ship here? Um, and all of us tend to go back and forth. We all have unhealed wounds, whether we're aware of them or not. We all have them to some degree. And if they're significant, they can really be driving our behavior and the way that we interact with the world. And so thinking about, okay, how does the like functional adult in me respond to things? How would a functional adult handle this kind of situation? Probably with emotional maturity, probably assertively. Um, they're looking for, um, they're solutions oriented and they're able to stand up for themselves. That wounded child or even that wounded adult is the one that's fearful that, oh, I'm afraid they're going to be mad at me. I'm afraid they're not going to like me and I don't deserve it. And they were mean to me. And so that means there's something wrong with me, versus the functional adult who sees that people being mean to us as, wow, uh, that person has issues. I'm not going to let that stuff in. Their behavior is outrageous. And boy, I'm sure I'm glad I'm limiting that in my life. So we don't own it. We don't let those attacks cut so deep. It's that the wounded child that is letting that stuff in, because that's what kids do. Kids by nature are very egocentric. Everything is about them. You know, if their parents get a divorce, they fear it's because of them. If the teacher's mad, they fear it's because of them. If they um, step on a crack and then their mom has a backache, they think it's because of them. If their parents yell at them or, punish them or do whatever, beat them, cuss them out, call them names, they take it as I'm bad. They internalize that. I'm the problem, instead of seeing it as, boy, my parents are really screwed up. That's outrageous. They shouldn't be treating me like that. We don't get that level of um, awareness or until we're adults, until we have a different perspective on the world. But what trips so many of us up is, and it's weird to think about this, but it's kind of cool at the same time, that once we realize, oh my gosh, um, I was interacting with this person I've known for so long, or even a person that I'm, that's new in my life, through that lens of the wounded child. And I was internalizing everything. They were making fun of me, they were teasing me, they were bullying me, and I always thought it was because I'm bad, I'm somehow flawed, I'm damaged, I don't deserve to set boundaries. And so I took it and I took it and I took it. And then when we realize, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm an adult and I have a lot of control and power in my life. And I don't need to handle this. I don't need to, no, I need to handle it. I don't need to internalize this. And I don't need to stick around for it. And um, their behavior is wildly inappropriate. And that is absolutely a reflection of them. It's not a reflection of me. So I'm not going to stand here and continue to try to prove my worth to somebody who doesn't see it. That's just wasting my time. And their behavior, that these are their limitations. They're throwing a fit. They're not talking to me. They're cussing me out. They're, raging at me. They're manipulating. They're cheating. They're lying. We see when we're coming from that functional adult place, we realize that's on them. This is a dysfunctional adult over here who's behaving like this, and I can't. That behavior did not start with me. It's not going to stop with me, and it's not within my ability to fix it, nor is that my responsibility. But it takes practice. But once your life starts working and you start setting boundaries and you stop tolerating being, if you're dating somebody, being plan B, or um, really get just acknowledging when you're being treated in a way that's not okay with you. When you start doing that and start addressing it with people, the right people are going to be team oriented and solutions oriented and accountable. They're going to own it and they're going to apologize, and then they're going to actively work to do something different so that doesn't keep happening. That's a significant thing to look for. So, you can't just look at words, because talk is free. It's not just cheap, it's free. It's actions that matter. Let's see, let me scroll up here. Oh, Sable, hi. Thank you for the live stream donation. I appreciate that. These little emoji things are so cute. Let's see. Humbled Clay says, what do you do when every attempt at reaching out for help is left just hanging out there? Oh boy. I suppose it depends on what kind of help you're needing. I would encourage you, at a minimum, to consider joining some support groups for narcissistic abuse. There's a lot out there. You can find mine over on Facebook. It's if you look for groups and look for Thrive After Abuse. We have a page and we have a group. So make sure if you're interested in joining the group that you join the group. Uh, so yes, people brainstorm there all the time, and it's a really support groups are a wonderful place to get support. And like I said, there's quite a few of them out there. There's a lot of free ones out there, and it can be really nice to just be heard and be validated, and by people who get it. Yes, UNA mentions we are talking about the kind of empty chair technique, and she says, even practicing in front of a mirror can help some. Yes. Yeah. Even if you're driving your car and you're just talking out loud, kind of working through the words helps tremendously. L says, the hardest thing for me right now is openly expressing my needs with a partner. I need certain things to feel loved and tend towards withdrawing and victim mentality. So, the openly expressing needs with a partner, this is something that I see trips up a lot of people, and again, myself included, for quite a while there. Uh, it's important that there's that level of emotional safety there. So if there's that level of emotional safety, we know this relationship has potential to grow into something. Like that, there's that solid foundation there. Both people are, reasonably emotionally available. They're reasonably able to, communicate. It's the whole kind of good enough concept. Like we're not looking for perfect, but is a person able to communicate well enough? Is a person able to be emotionally available enough to have a relationship? Is a person able, to be respectful enough that you're able to communicate with them and they're able to be accountable and all of this stuff? So once that the foundation for emotional safety has been built, then, and I would say only then, is it reasonable to start having expectations of each other. Before that part, it's all infatuation. It's all, oh, you're so amazing, and you see the best in the other person, and you're focusing on everything that you have in common, and there is no real relationship there yet, because it is all about that you know that initial stage. We all go through it, of rose-colored glasses. It's when people, it's like the old real MTV Real World show used to say, it's when people stop being polite and they start getting real. That's when the relationships really start. Before then, it's just acquaintances. And so this is when, the rubber meets the road, kind of a thing. When disagreements start surfacing, the people stop being polite. You start realizing, oh my gosh, this person, the first 3 months of getting to know them, they always did such a great job. Their house was always clean and all of this. But then you find out later on, no, it was actually their mother coming over and cleaning for them, or their house wasn't clean. They were throwing everything in their closet, trying to impress you. Like you start find do you see what I'm saying? Like you start finding out like a truth about people. And then um but so so you're at the stage where that expressing needs, that's when the relationship has is potentially starting to become real. And uh so it, ideally your partner is able to do the same. So for both of you, expressing your thoughts and your feelings and your wants and your needs, and having these kind of deeper discussions about getting to know the other person as an individual, not just what do we have in common, but what makes you you at a deeper level. And um, we tend to feel comfortable expressing needs when we know our needs are going to be received well, not even necessarily met, but received well. And that goes back to respect. So if we're saying, gosh, um, I really need to um, hear from my partner at least once a day. That's just something that's significant. Or I really need to have, um, I don't know, some alone time. Or I really need, after there's a disagreement about something, that we're able to sit down in the next couple of days and talk it through. So you're voicing what you need. And then the next part of that is paying attention to how is this other person responding to those needs. And there's a lot of relationships that kind of die on the vine at this point, because this is when things start becoming real. And it's okay, does this other person, and does the two people involved have the level of emotional availability and the level of effective communication and respect and dignity needed for a relationship? And unfortunately, what a lot of people do is those elements aren't there, but there's already feelings involved. And so they try to keep the relationship going, not realizing that there is no relationship. There really isn't a relationship. It's it's an acquaintance level dynamic where there's probably sex involved, but there's no real depth there. And this is how that it's kind of the fork in the road, and this is where that split is. And so realizing, um, you know, can this person, meet my needs, and vice versa? Like, can we meet each other's needs in this relationship? And it just really comes down to effective communication. Um, and what you were saying as far as the withdrawing and victim mentality, L, the withdrawing may be coming from a place of being afraid of being hurt or let down. So I think when we've experienced enough pain, people tend to just become very avoidant. And it's the whole thing of like, well, I'm going to distance myself before you distance yourself. I'm going to leave you before you can leave me. I'm going to pull away first before you can pull away. It's a way that we try to keep ourselves safe. And in some situations that might be appropriate. If there's not that level, if those ingredients for a functional relationship aren't present, then withdrawing and acknowledging, wow, this is deeply unfortunate. This does not, I thought it had what it took, but it doesn't. And I've tried it with effective communication. And this person, they rage at me, they give me the silent treatment, they don't respond to my needs well at all. So withdrawing isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's completely appropriate. That's where deal breakers come into play. Um, the victim mentality, that's worth kind of doing some thinking about. And again, these things they're tricky because there's times where a person truly is victimized. And there's a difference between being victimized and having a victim mentality. So if a person's victimized, if they're preyed upon, then they are a victim. Yeah, I think that word victim has so much negative connotation. It's seen as, um, something dysfunctional or deeply problematic, and it's not. There's times where a person is truly victimized, and they feel like a victim because they are a victim. The victim mentality is different. So the victim mentality tends to be more of a result of like that wounded part of ourselves where we're internalizing things. Oh, this is never going to work, and this always happens, never works out for me. And um it's kind of like our inner Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. It's just kind of, oh, this is never going to work, and everything's so dark and dreary, nobody likes me, and my life's never going to change. And it's these feelings of powerlessness in our life. It's So our locus of control, we're placing outside of ourselves. Events in life happen to us instead of us realizing events happen and then we respond to them. So it's kind of that wounded adult versus the functional adult. The wounded part of us is, oh, these events just keep happening, I'm powerless, I'm helpless. That's that wounded child. The functional adult is, you know what? Sometimes bad things happen to good people. It's not right. Not fair. I didn't deserve it, but I still have uh, power in my own life. I have the ability to make decisions and to choose a different way of going. I don't need to internalize this. If my boss, fired me or did something horrible, they were out to get me. Um, you know, they obviously have huge issues if that's their mentality, and I'm not going to own that. I'm not going to let that somehow negatively impact my self-worth or my self-esteem, you know? So really the way out of victim mentality, and again, this is different than being a victim or being victimized. The victim mentality is through accountability, of acknowledging, okay, where um, what control do I have in this situation? What is an appropriate level of control? Because again, sometimes things just happen that are outside of our control. So being truly accountable, like functionally accountable, I guess we could say, is when we're acknowledging what is reasonable. We don't have control over other people. We don't have control over the weather. We don't have control over, you know, lots of things. But we do have control over how we respond to that and what we do. And also, I would say the meaning that we assign to certain events. And that's really powerful. So we can choose to, and I know that might sound weird, because it doesn't feel like a choice in the moment, but I think once you're aware of this, then it does become, um, you realize kind of the power that you have, realizing we have control over whether or not we internalize things. So if somebody dumps all of their garbage onto us and they're bullying and they're cutting you down and it's all kinds of stuff, it's completely okay and understandable to have hurt feelings and to be upset by that. Totally understandable. But we don't have to let that negatively impact our self-worth. We can realize that's a reflection of them. That's on them. So, okay. And that's a really great uh, point, Missouri Cowboy. I like that a lot. He says, I talk out loud to my inner Eeyore, and I allow him to talk out loud too, and validate his words and seek solutions for us. I love that. Yes. Yes. And I think that's a big part of this whole kind of process of integration, is making peace with all of these different sides of ourselves. That wounded part of us that feels that might be feeling really unlovable, or just not worthy of having boundaries, or all of these feelings of, oh, life just keeps happening to me and I just have no control. To for the functional adult in us to give that part love and to recognize, um, it's almost like, the adult in you acknowledging that wounded 6-year-old in you and just kind of giving them a hug and letting them know, oh gosh, kiddo, there's so much that is good and right about you, and here's what you've done. And you're acknowledging that the things that you have done, and you're trying to give that wounded child more of a an appropriate balance of what they're responsible for and what they have control over and what they don't. You know, your parents getting a divorce, or your dad leaving you and not talking to you for a couple years, or your mom beating you. Honey, that was not your fault. You don't, this, that was not your responsibility to try to control that or keep their marriage together or to make sure the bills were paid, or um, to do all of that stuff. That was inappropriate for your parents to put that on you because you're a kid, and your job as a kid is just simply to be a kid. That's it. You don't have, kids don't have that kind of power. And um for all those people out there that made you feel less than and who took out all their stuff on you, you know these are deeply damaged people, and you got in their path, and that's not your fault. And had it not been you, it would have been somebody else, because people like that, that's what they do. They just have an axe to grind, and they just go around destroying other people because of their own issues. There's lots of stuff that's good and right with you, and truly acknowledging that. Um, let's see here. Siobhan is here. Welcome. She says, I tell my inner Eeyore to shut it because it makes me laugh. Yeah. And okay, so let's talk about that for a second. There is kind of this other strategy to handling the inner Eeyore. Uh, I completely agree with what Missouri Cowboy was saying as far as, I think kind of having this pity party, or acknowledging, or, just acknowledging, oh, everything's kind of not good and sad and all my fault and never going to work. Truly acknowledging that is oftentimes the first step towards self-compassion. And so in bringing, kind of working with that wounded part of ourself. But if it's ongoing, then another strategy to try is to allow yourself, okay, you know what? I'm just going to sit here. Like, if you got to get moving and you're like, you know what? This is just debilitating, all of this heaviness, to kind of set a time. Like, okay, you know what? I'm going to let myself sit here for the next 10 minutes and just feel bad and acknowledge, like, this was not right. This was not fair. I'm angry. I'm hurt. Um, to just let it out as much as you can, and then be like, okay, after that 10 minutes is up, then I'm going to go get in the shower and get going. So there's kind of two different ways to work with that, whatever works for you. So let's see. Let me scroll up here. Okay. Oh, and I guess we are at our time limit already. My gosh. Sam, hi. How are ya? Uh, I wanted to say real quick too, with Angie, these live streams, I normally do them with Angie on Tuesdays. She couldn't make it. She had a last minute thing come up again this week. So I know she's just been staying super busy. Kids, she's got kids and in and out of school and all kinds of stuff. So hopefully she'll be able to join us next week. And I'll keep you guys posted as far as where we're going to be. I don't know if we'll be on my channel again or if we're going to be on hers, but I'll let you know. So I guess with all that said, we'll just wrap up. Dog is going nuts. I don't know if you can hear that, but So with that said, I'll see you guys tomorrow night. I do plan on doing the live stream at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday nights. So my channel, Thrive After Abuse. I'll see you then. As always, lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.